Ruddy Turnstone is a Harrisburg-based indie rock artist. His new single, I've Been to This Dungeon Before, is an epic, moody, but catchy piece of music that features guest vocals from Jessica Boyer and violin from Robin Chambers, out now on all streaming platforms. On Saturn, a pop artist from Lancaster, Pennsylvania, just released his debut single titled Breathe in This Love. This single is available on all streaming platforms. Follow Ronnie at RONNIE on Saturn on all social media platforms. Or check out his website, www.withcog/Ronnie on Saturn.
Can't deny it, this feeling I got for you, babe.
Good morning, everybody. My name is, it's afternoon now.
It is afternoon now, yeah.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Corey Rosen, and you are listening to the Story Podcast. Today I have on a super awesome guest, Mr. Dan Meyer.
Got it.
From engineering in multi-million-dollar recording studios and music venues to the classroom, Dan has worn many hats during his short time in the music industry. Originally from the suburbs of Philly, Dan has dug his roots in Central PA. Graduating from York College of Pennsylvania in 2016, he quickly returned to manage the college's new recording studio and organically transitioned into teaching their music production courses. Through his academic years, he jumped at every opportunity and grew a network of industry professionals in the area that opened up several doors. While his first love will always be mixing songs that inspire him and working with artists in the studio, he is no stranger to the live events side of music. Dan is an example of how building organic relationships can lead to a sustainable career in an otherwise competitive and arguably oversaturated industry. Dan, how you doing today?
I'm doing great. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. We've had a lot to talk about before we started this, so I'm really excited to dive deep into all of those topics. But first, we got to start with where you began. Where did your love of music start?
I feel like that's such a loaded question. I go on forever. I'll try to do the concise version. So I grew up in Philly, as you already noted. My dad is a singer-songwriter, so I always kind of grew up around music at least. How I got into playing it myself is kind of funny, but I was like 9 at the time, so it tracks for a 9-year-old. But basically, my school every year the band would go to Hershey Park for like the Cavalcade Music Festival, whatever it is. I don't remember. And I was like, oh, I get to miss school for a day and go to Hershey Park? Sure. So like that's why I joined band, honestly, which sounds so hilarious and like how it's become a career, but
But it tracks.
Yeah.
It tracks
Yeah. I mean, I was 9.
Yeah.
So I did that, and I was in band for a bit. It was kind of more of an extracurricular type thing for a bit. And then some of my friends started a band. Like we had someone pick up guitar, another bass player, and they wanted to play a band. And I was a percussionist. I hadn't played drum set that much at the time, but I was like, I could learn drum set. Why not? That sounds like a fun thing. So did that, had bands all throughout, middle school through high school and then into college and everything. Eventually, graduating high school, it came to time where, decide what you want to do. That thing that we put on 18-year-olds of what do you want to do for the rest of your life? Let's sign, hundreds of thousands worth of loans. And what do you want to do? And funny enough, so it's really that my parents pushed me, and I'm grateful they did. But I was the mindset. Sorry, I should backtrack a little bit here. I decided I wanted to go for recording because one of my high school bands, like we hit the point where we wanted to start making music, like actually that people consume, not just playing shows. So we tried to record it. It was one of those things where like, how hard could it be? So I tried doing it myself. It was awful, and we eventually hired someone else to do it. But through that process, I still learned that I really enjoyed it. And like, this is a really cool thing. I like that I can get the creativity out. I just fell in love with it. So I was like, okay, I want to get into mixing and producing and all that. And through some research, I saw like, those internships and things like that. So my original idea was to just kind of do like maybe a 2-year degree at community college and then try and do internships and stuff. And that can be a viable path too. But my parents were very much the type of like, no, you're going to a 4-year school. I was like, okay, angsty teenager. I fought that a little bit. And then we started visiting schools. And York was just the one that I went to, had the program I was looking for in music industry and recording technology as their degree. It's what I got. But had the degree I was looking for. And it was also one of those things that on the campus, talking to the professors, I just felt comfortable. And we talked about this earlier before we went on air, but like, we're both introverts. I've definitely learned to talk and be more extroverted, but at the end of the day, I'm an introvert. So that comfortability, that feeling at home was very important to me. And that's what York had over the other schools I looked at. They felt very welcoming. I feel like I could fit in. So I went and did that, and really, that's the thing that opened up so many other doors for me. And I know we'll talk a lot about networking here and stuff, but one of the things I stress as a college professor too, is that the degree you get, that physical piece of paper for this particular field in engineering and recording, if you want to be working in studio and that kind of stuff, you're not paying that tuition fee for the piece of paper. You're paying for networking opportunities to hopefully have professors that have a network they can share with you, to meet people, to build a portfolio. Like you'll have access hopefully to equipment that you wouldn't otherwise have. Like this room we're in right now is a great example of
Yeah.
like people don't have this normally in their house.
No.
But as a student here, you have access to it and you can use it. That's the stuff you're paying for. That's what that tuition dollar is really going towards for you. So if you're going to school for this kind of stuff, just my quick PSA is if you're not networking and you're not taking advantage and building that portfolio while you're in school, that is a grave mistake. Do not do that, please.
And I'd argue that goes for really any kind of job.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, there's stuff like, I guess I'll put it this way of, you can walk into a recording studio and if you're trying to get hired, they're not going to ask for your degree.
No.
They're going to ask for that portfolio and like, what have you done?
What's your work?
Yeah. I mean, you can't do that with nursing. Like nursing, you need a degree.
Yeah, okay, with doctors and stuff. Yeah,
Yes.
of course.
So there's things where you have to have a degree.
Trade jobs.
You don't need a degree for this stuff. It doesn't. Now, I don't want to say that to disparage college. Again, I'm a professor, and it worked for me very well. But if you're going to pay that money, and college it's expensive.
It is.
If you're going to do that, make sure you're actually going in with the right mindset and taking advantage of that opportunity. It's something I be in my students' head all the time, and my younger students are like 18. They don't always get it, and it takes a few years before it really clicks. But just do it now, because unfortunately it is also an industry where like you have to do some free work sometimes or do stuff very cheap. Like you're not going to be making big bucks right out of the gate. So when would you rather do that? When you're in your mid 20s and you've graduated school and now you have rent to pay and maybe you have a significant other, what have you, that you have to now like
take care of,
maybe support or help out, any of those things. You're going to have more responsibilities. Responsibilities only grow as you get older. I understand some young people already have a lot of responsibilities depending on their upbringing and their environment, but at the end of the day, it only becomes more as you get older. So use that time when you're in college where before you have all those to do that free work. Do it now, because you're probably going to have to do it at some point to build that portfolio and get those opportunities. And if you're waiting to after you graduate to do it, well, that's time lost. Not to say you can't do it. You can, but
it's going to be a whole waste of time to do free stuff later.
Yeah.
Where you can't afford to do free stuff.
Mm-hmm.
College, and this is something I didn't realize. I went to college at 17, which is still a child comparatively.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
So I didn't know what I had, and granted, I didn't do the stereotypical American college experience of going out and partying and everything. This is a Bible college, but even I didn't take advantage of it. I have colleagues here or professors here that have been on Broadway, that have been that graduated from Peabody, that know people like high level musicians in the industry, and I just didn't take advantage of it until after I went to college and started this podcast. Now I'm starting to take advantage of all those things.
And is it like, I don't want to disparage anyone, better late than never.
Yeah, better late than never for sure. But
you can always do it. Like there's people in their 30s that find us, figure out what they want to do in life, and they make it happen.
That's true.
So again, I don't want to be disparaging to those people, but at the same time, for those of you that you think this is what you want to do and you're in school for it now and you're paying tuition, this is your PSA to hopefully get you to take advantage now.
Yeah.
Because you're going to look back, like there's still things, even saying this now in hindsight, I'm like, oh, I could have done this better. Oh, I could have been X further along in my career if I had done this however many years sooner. Hindsight's 2020.
Yeah, hindsight's 2020. And that will make you realize, oh, well, in 10 years, I'm going to regret it if I don't start it now.
Yeah.
So get started now.
And I'll say I was lucky in that I had a real drive for this stuff. I knew I wanted to do it. And like I said, my original plan wasn't even to go to school. So when I got there, I was like, I just want to get in and record. Like that was the itch I had that I needed to scratch. So I found a way to do it. Like I did an internship before I was actually allowed to, because at York, least the time, I don't know if they changed it, you couldn't take an internship for credit until you had 60 credits already. I had no patience for that. So I just found a studio that would take me as an intern. I did it basically outside of the college, technically. All this to say is I was hungry for every opportunity. So I naturally gravitated towards doing this stuff. But that being said, is if someone had told me what I am saying now, I probably would have taken even more opportunity than what I did. I don't have regrets necessarily, but again, hindsight being 2020,
Just lost chances.
yeah,
Yeah.
I could have done more, but you can always do more too. So
Yeah.
you can't beat yourself up too hard about that. But
There's
then I
always-
have students now that and I don't want to be again disparaging them either. Like I had a student recently say to me, we're working in a live sound class, and they were very apprehensive about even just touching the console. They're staying in the back, and I'll be frank, like because of how that degree is set up, I get a mixture of students. Some want to be A&R reps. They don't actually want to be in production, but it's a more universal degree than that. So like those people get mixed into the production classes. So I'm aware of that. I know that some don't have that drive for recording or live sound because that's not realistically what they want to do. And I'll be honest, this student was quiet in the back of the room, and I kind of assumed that they were in that camp. And then I finally asked, like, what do you want to do? And they're like, oh, I want to do live sound, like what this class is for. I was like, why haven't you come up and like you haven't even touched the console? And like, I'm afraid of making a mistake. I was like, no, make the mistake. I'm not gonna lie to you. You're going to make mistakes.
Yeah,
I'm not
here
gonna
is where
lie.
you need to make mistakes.
Exactly. Because what's gonna happen is you're not gonna somehow set the console on fire. Like that would be
No.
impressive, honestly. Like what are you gonna do? It's gonna feed back. Okay.
That's
How
fine.
many times have I fed back at a show? Countless. And I learned more and more on how to avoid that because I made the mistake. The most things I know is because I messed it up prior. That's how I learned most things I have. So I had to just tell that student of like, make the mistake because you're in a classroom right now. This is your opportunity to learn. And, there's really no downside to making a mistake now. You have a professor here who will then tell you, oh, hey, this is what you did wrong. Here's how you do it better. Whereas in the field, unfortunately, it can be a very unforgiving field, especially in live sound. Because generally, the way I put it is, you have a bunch of guys working really hard. They're trying to do 12 hours of work in 2 hours. It's go, go, go. And it's not anything to take personally. If anyone's worked in live sound, they know how it can be. People can be very terse with you. They can be very, very short. And it seems like they're being mean. Never take it personally because that's very rarely the case that they're trying to be mean. It's just, again, a lot of
It's
pressure.
work.
It
Yeah.
is work. And again, the way schedules are as a production manager, I learned that like we are trying to squeeze like a whole day's worth of work in a few hours, a lot of time. So there's not a whole lot of room for error. But all that said, that do you want to make a mistake in that environment where someone may just be like, oh, okay, you're in my way. Just go. They won't even tell you necessarily how to fix the mistake, and that will happen too. I'm going to be honest with you. That still happens to me when I'm working with people at a higher level than myself. But if you can avoid that and make the mistake while you're in a classroom and have a professor who will literally just take you by the hand and walk you through it, is not going to reprimand you for it, when would you rather make that mistake if you had the choice?
Right, exactly. And that goes for so many college students that are so afraid to take advantage of what they have. You literally
Mhm.
paid for that experience. You need to take advantage of
Oh
it.
yeah, that's what you're paying for.
That's literally what you're paying
Yeah.
for. You're not paying there just to be. It's not high school
Mhm.
where you're forced to go.
Yeah.
You're literally choosing to do this. So you better take it.
Doesn't always
full
feel that
advantage.
way, especially
Doesn't-
sometimes you have parents that
Yeah, right,
Yeah.
right. If you have parents but you're literally paying for that product.
Mhm.
You better. I pay for my washing machine. I'm gonna get as much as I can out of that washing machine for as
Absolutely.
long as I can, right?
Yeah.
And why
Money
not
well spent. Yeah. Like
money well spent? Yeah. Do the same with college. Make sure
Mhm.
it's money well spent. Uh, I agree with you. The piece of paper means nothing.
Yeah.
For me, especially for music composition. Oh, great! You went to music composition. What have you done?
Mhm. They want to see what have you composed.
Yeah. What have you composed?
Because I mean, it's the old thing you with college students say all the time: is C's get degrees. Yeah.
Yeah.
You did get a degree, and you barely passed.
Yeah. Right.
So
Right.
you barely know the material, and you still got that degree. But a studio's never going to ask for your GPA. They're never going to ask for the transcript. They don't care, frankly. And don't get me wrong, there's some things, especially if you're in more corporate side of it, like if you want to go and engineer for like Marvel, which is owned by Disney, yeah, that piece of paper is going to come into more play. Or if everything else being equal, having that on your resume, if you have two people with a great portfolio, similar experiences, and this one person went to school for it and maybe gathered a little more from that, and the other person didn't, maybe that'll give you a leg up.
Slight edge.
Yeah, and maybe it really depends because what else was that person doing instead of being in school? If they were engineering in a big studio or like mentoring with, a big name engineer, maybe that's the leg up. I don't like
Mhm.
it varies there, but
Go and get your experience at college.
yes, that is the core of what I'm saying. Yes.
Yes.
We want to make it super concise. Sorry, I can be long-winded, but
So, we kind of skipped over your whole entire band phase.
yes, sorry.
Let's go back into that.
Okay. I mean, so much of it is really just like I like playing in bands. I don't have a whole lot of a resume in that sense of like doing anything super cool. Um, what would you like to know about my bands? I
What are
guess
some of the what was the genre? I mean, we have some of your songs here.
we do. Yes, that's from the current band I'm playing with.
Let's talk about that then. Let's talk about Light for Love.
Life for Love. Okay. So I can't speak too much of the lyricism. I am not the lyricist. I am the drummer. Just to be frank about that. This band is I'd probably call them like very '90s inspired.
Mm.
I'm the youngest one in the band by about 10 years.
I'm noticing a lot of bands nowadays are becoming more and more 90s inspired.
Everything's cyclical.
Yeah.
In this case, it's that the main songwriter and those guys like they had their formative years in the '90s, I think, or a lot of their inspirations came from that. Particularly the singer and guitarist was the bass and drum tech for the band Live. If anyone knows that.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So that's all. That's actually kind of how I found this band. If you want to hear that story, is I was engineering at Live Studio, Think Loud in New York. There's some Rolling Stones articles and some drama around that band now. We won't touch on that. But basically, they had a studio in New York, Think Loud, beautiful, like multi-million-dollar space. I got to be an assistant on their 717 EP they put out and all that stuff. But all to say is I got to work there, and the singer for the band I'm currently involved in Nothing, Sean, being friends with Chad Taylor, the guitarist, they came in and they were actually recording an EP. And I was an engineer at the time. Like, they heard me play some drums, just sound checking them, basically. And shortly after, their drummer left the band. And it was one of those things of like, you sound pretty good. Let's hit him up. So they hit me up. We jammed a little bit, and it just, it was a good fit. And that's kind of all she wrote. I just stuck with the band.
Sweet. And did you also mix and master this too, or?
I did. So I didn't master it. Dan Mausch, who's based out up North State, he's done like I think recently he did something with Avenged Sevenfold and stuff. So he's had some decent credits. He mastered it. I mixed it. I engineered a good chunk of it. I engineered the guitar, bass. Our friend Chris Lozer engineered the vocals, and he actually recorded me on drums as well because I was drumming. I didn't really want to engineer that too. So yeah, it was kind of a mix. We all have our say in the songwriting process. The core of it usually comes from our two guitarists. Bass player also has written a few parts. And then they come in, kind of with like the bare bones chords, the singer-songwriter version of the song, where it's like vocals and guitar, which is the core of any good song. If you can't really strip your song down to that, it's don't want to make a blanket statement, so there's exceptions, but a lot of times you don't have much of a song if you can't strip it down to those basic melody and harmony, like the chords. So that's what comes to the table with us. Start playing on some electrics. Usually I write my drum parts, I hear it and I just start playing. And then we kind of let it shape and mold from there just over time.
And so this is Light for Love. What's the band's name?
Volume to Nothing.
Volume to Nothing.
It's kinda hard to see the way we run. Kinda hard to see where we went wrong. Time to learn a way of being strong again. Against all the odds. It's kinda hard to tell things we knew. Kinda sad to see the way we're grown. Another baby cries inside the womb tonight. But I don't hear nothing yet. Oh yeah. One man, no lover. Oh yeah. One man. Oh, lover. Try to be and see the work we've done. Overcome the day, finding the sun. Not another day goes by, but we are in love for life. I know that this is right. Oh yeah. Woman, no lover. Oh yeah. Woman. Oh, lover. Woman. Write it on your stone so I can read about it. Moving forward so the time so I can breathe and be around to help you spread the light for oh yeah, woman. Oh, lover. Woman.
And that was Light for Love by, what was the band's name again?
Volume to Nothing.
Volume to Nothing. So you said you were engineering a guitar, you were engineering the vocals. What does that mean?
It's a very catch-all term. So not like, fancy engineering, like, your mechanical engineers and guys building stuff, but essentially it's the person working the equipment, if I'm trying to boil down the most basic things.
Okay.
So the ones actually sitting with the mixing console, your preamps, all your fancy gear, that's your engineer, the person that's running the session. And that term has also become blurred. Like it used to be when there's more money in the industry, you had like several people that have now become one person, as in used to have a dedicated producer, a person that was just the creative drive and produced the song. And your engineer would be a completely different person, be someone that their job was literally to put microphones on like cabinets or microphones on drums, plug them in, turn up the gain, hit record.
Literally the chords and tech guy.
Yes, it was the very technical side, and the producer would be more the creative side. Now, generally, those things get a little more conflated. It depends at the higher levels where there's still a bit more money, you may get more dedicated roles still, but a lot of times that is the same person doing that role. And even the term producer, has shifted, or depends on who you ask. Like, I'm opinionated here, so I don't want to disparage anyone. I use that word a lot, but a lot of times people will create a beat and they call themselves a producer. To me, that's a beat maker, not a producer, unless you're really working with the artist and like changing up the arrangement. Then you start getting into production territory. If you're just making something like
You're
a beat
making a track
and then selling it, I would argue that's not a producer. But at the end of the day, call yourself whatever you want to call yourself. It really doesn't matter. As long as people like your product, who cares? At the end of the day,
the points don't matter.
Yeah, I can be elitist about stuff I want, but at the end of the day, it's an opinion. What does it really matter at the end of the day? But my point really being there is that a lot of these terms get very, again, blurry between you have a tracking engineer, your mix engineer is the person that takes the recorded stuff and then tries to make it sound good together. And then you have a mastering engineer, which mastering is like this weird black magic that no one really understands what it is. It's, again, a general term for, okay, the mix is done. What are the final steps to make it ready for distribution? That's mastering. And that can be anywhere from making some final changes to the mix to maybe make it translate across better systems better, because a song's not going to sound the same in the studio as it does in your car,
earphones,
on your phone. Yeah.
Out of your phone.
Yeah. All that stuff. It's going to sound different. So sometimes getting that last step. And that's why personally we had Dan Mausch master this one, because me being, in the band, part of the writing process, we went through pre-production. I engineered a lot of it and then I mixed it. I was telling you earlier, I had no objectivity left. I had no idea if the changes I were making on these songs were good or bad, lateral moves. I really didn't know anymore because I've heard them so many times. So you can't be objective at that point. So hiring Dan was basically a means to have another set of ears on it. And I even had him give me some feedback on, there's only one song he actually really gave me notes on, but I was like, hey, if there's anything that I can fix in the mix, let me know, because I will make those changes. because again, I just couldn't tell anymore. Like, it's, you spend all your time and like with the same work, it just kind of starts to sound the same, and you're not sure if it sounds good or bad anymore. It's demo-itis almost, but like on the actual mix.
Right. It's always fun when you, create something and you just forget about it for a little while, and then, like,
Mhm.
you come back to it and you're like, "Oh my gosh, what was I doing?"
Oh, 100%. Sometimes the best thing you can do is walk away and come
Yeah.
back. Unfortunately, towards the end of this process, this EP took way too long to make, which some people would think would be a good thing. You get to spend a lot of time on it, but it was more so. We started tracking the songs in like 2021, and we're just getting the songs out now. We're doing more the streaming approach where we're doing it single by single. So, Incredible Liar actually is the first one that came out. You can listen now on Spotify, Apple Music. Um, this one, Light for Love, kind of actually, I just mentioned it's got a little bit of a premiere. That one's not actually on streaming yet.
Oh, wow.
And neither is The Galleon yet. So there's a little bit of a preview here on some stuff. Um, but yeah, I mean, sorry, I lose my train of thought a little bit. But basically, spent so much time with these songs, it just really made sense to get a mastering engineer in that could make some final tweaks to the mix and basically be a little more objective. Because for them, it's like first time I'm hearing it, I can make gut decisions on my first impressions, and you know, hopefully that is an improvement. And I think it is actually. I really like what Dan did with it. So if you're looking for a mastering engineer, I can highly recommend him.
So let's actually go into the Galleon,
Mhm,
and then after that, we'll go into more of the networking, the professor side of
mhm.
things. So tell me about the Galleon.
The Galleon, the most I can say about this one is it is my favorite song to play on drums. I come from a very metal background, and this is the one where I get to use some double kick on, and it's a little heavier, so it's more what I'm used to. It's a very try to keep the song pretty raw in the sense of it's a little messy, a little loose with time, but like I think in a way that really works for it.
That's awesome. Well, this is the Galleon by Volume to Nothing.
Mhm.
I've been around the town and I can say you have lost your mind. I've been around the crowd and I can say you have broken lies. She said I know, he said I don't. I've walked these halls and saw a side of you some may never see. I'm not caving in, 'cause I'm not playing this. I'm asked to sing for you, but that could mean many different things. You're on a sinking ship, and I can say you're a ghost to me. Oh yeah. He said I know, she said I don't. I've walked the plank and swabbed the deck and said you're dried soft to me. I'm not caving in, 'cause I'm not playing And I've been around the crowd, and I can say you have broken lines. She said, I know.
And that was The Galleon by Volume to Nothing.
Volume to Nothing.
So, what a
It's gonna be
long
all feedback
outro.
here for a little bit here. Let that die down. So just to explain that this song bleeds into the next one, so that feedback
I
continues,
see, very
and then the
much.
next song kicks in.
Very
But yeah,
much.
very-
I love songs that do that, like
Mhm.
Green Day's Boulevard to Broken Dreams and
Yep.
Holiday, or it's Holiday and a Boulevard to Broken Dreams. I think it is.
Yep, same thing. I think it's Saint Jimmy Until We Are the Waiting. At
Oh,
the end of that.
really?
There's a few songs on that album that do that.
That I love
Yeah.
that. That's so much fun.
And just get brought up. I got a comment. That is so. Talking about the musician side of stuff. That is the album I learned to play drums to.
Really?
That would come out 2004-ish, which was around the time I really started getting into drum set. So I said started band at 9, up in 10 in 2004. So yeah, it was around when that album came out. I was probably a little late to hearing the album. Also being a 10-year-old hearing that album, a few expletives on there and stuff.
Yeah, right.
20-year-old advisory sticker. But I actually learned to play drums to that one. And then also another note on that album is I think that is almost a masterclass in a modern concept album because it still stands up as individual songs. You do not have to listen to it front to back. And in a streaming world, and this was still before streaming, you kind of need that because people don't listen to albums front to back anymore. You're not putting a vinyl record on a turntable and listening to the whole thing. You're not even putting a CD in a car and listening to the whole thing. You're on Spotify and you're listening to one song from one artist and the next artist, and it's all over the place. But that album also does hold up very well as telling a story. They have the Broadway play now, so that's pretty common knowledge, I think, that it's a concept album. But a lot of people, when it came out, did not know that at all. They didn't realize that Saint Jimmy was a character or Jesus Suburbia is a character and all that stuff in this concept album, basically.
Really?
Yeah.
I haven't listened to the whole album.
You might have to. It's
I might have
cool.
to. Yeah.
If you're into that kind of stuff, yeah.
Yeah, that's one thing I've realized, that I have grown up in the single world, and I haven't ever dived into an album ever.
Yeah.
Even though I've been told repeatedly that I should.
But I guess to have the point home, you've been able to listen to some of those songs and they still stand up perfectly fine on their own. They don't feel like they're missing something or part of the story, which is something older concept albums can fall into. But those albums generally came from an era where you were listening to it on vinyl. And that's how the recording medium has changed so much is who's putting on a vinyl record and picking out song 3? They're not. They're playing from the start and listening through. You're not trying to put the needle down and find the right spot.
That'd be impressive.
It would be, honestly.
It'd be a talent.
It'd probably also find a way to wreck your records pretty quick there too if you weren't careful. But yeah, I mean that's
a party trick.
Oh yeah. I could go on a whole tangent there with the loudness wars and all that stuff. There's some interesting concepts, but unless you want to hear about it, I won't bore your listeners.
We'll have to do another podcast on that because I don't know about that at all.
That's the music production professor me's coming out a little bit there, but
let's dive more deep into that.
Okay.
Talking about musicianship as a professional musician, what that looks like. How do students become professional musicians, professional mixers? What goes into that? What are some of the biggest struggles that your students have in this day and age?
Like so many things, the hardest thing is getting started. Excuse me. So we talked about billing and network and things like that. And that is, I'm going to answer your question, but I'm going to go on a little bit of a tangent here, but something we talked about earlier with networking. So many students think networking, they hear the term networking and they think it's a buzzword. They think, okay, that's something I got to do. They can tell you, oh, networking is what you have to do. Your network is your net worth, all that fun stuff. But they don't really understand what networking is. They think they go to a conference like Launch or Roots and Blues or something like that, and they start handing out business cards and resumes, or they just start emailing as many people as they can with that kind of stuff, and they're going to get hired for it. That's not how this industry in particular generally works. You may get some bites that way. It can work, but you're playing a numbers game. You're going to send out, 100 business cards, and you may have one person show moderate interest. How you build these connections is through relationships. It is a relationship-based industry, and I mean organic, real relationships. I've had much more success at conferences after someone's panel, finding them hanging out at the bar or somewhere else after everything's done and offering to buy them a drink. And they'll be like, "Oh yeah, sounds great," or something. You get them a drink, and sometimes that's where it ends. Sometimes they have no interest in talking after that point or in that conversation. But that's a face they might remember. You show up, you meet them again, and you just keep showing up. And eventually, like, "Hey, didn't I see you? Didn't you buy me that drink at
Mhm.
launch? Yeah, how you doing? Like, like, exciting to talk to you." Like, usually that's how it goes. And sometimes you buy them that drink, and they actually will want to engage and have a conversation. And even that being said, that conversation may have nothing to do about work. Maybe they're a mix engineer, for example. They may not want to talk about mixing. Maybe they mix one of your favorite albums, and you may want them to talk about that, but they may not want to. You may have more success talking about their dog because they have a Bernese at home that they just love to death and they're a dog person. But you ingratiate yourself more to that person and you start building that relationship. Um, this also says that you're playing the long game with these relationships. You may meet that person and you may end up getting work from them or working with them, but it might not be for 5 years,
Mhm.
more than that. Anecdotally, I can say that's how my career has been. I went to York College. I was the student. The reason I got opportunities because I was a student that kept showing up. I was hungry. Anytime there was something to do, I stepped up and I tried to do it. So through that, I had as Professor Sean Young. Shout out to Dr. Young. Um, who's still a professor there. He does a great job. Has actually been a huge benefit to that program as well. So definitely want to give him a lot of credit here and a lot of credit for helping me make connections. Because essentially what happened was he introduced me to Chad Taylor, who was the guitarist Alive. Chad, this was Alive right before they got back together with their singer. And they're being based in York. Were kind of like, I guess, more trying to be a part of the community at the time. And they were actually coming over to the college and building that connection. And he was like kind of working with the school's rock band and things like that. So because of that, I got to meet Chad, and I explicitly say meet, not work for, not anything like that. I got to meet him, and again, because Sean was so nice, he kept inviting me to these things to be able to meet Chad and show my face more often.
Mhm.
To the point where like once I was 21, I was a senior and all that stuff. Chad did a panel, and then we went out and like got a beer afterwards. It's really me just sitting there, kind of having a conversation, but I was just a face there almost. But I did that enough, and Sean sung my praises to him enough that we had the signed artist for YMG that basically Chad heard. It was this band Port Ellis. I don't know if they're active anymore, but shout out to them. Great local band. But Chad heard their music and really wanted to produce them. And I was the student that got to go along and kind of hang out for that. And I got to do a little bit of engineering, just a little bit, not much. And all this grew into the point that eventually Chad was like, okay, I want to open the studio commercially. Because at that point, Think Loud was like a private studio the band had and friends of the band. And I was one of 3 people that he called up for this opportunity, and I got to work in this studio. This is also how I got to meet producers Carson Slovak and Grant McFarland. So they're rock metal producers. So if you know the band August Burns Red, they also did an Everclear record. They are in the band Galactic Empire, which is like the Star Wars metal tribute band, if you're familiar.
I do know that one.
So they've had some work, but I got to meet them through that because Carson grew up next door to Chad. He knew him. They were looking for a new studio spot, and they came and worked out of Think Loud for a little bit. So the short way of explaining all this is all these relationships happened organically. I never sent out a resume to these people. I never sent out a business card to these people. I just showed up, and then I got to meet them and work with them a little bit. And over time, I earned their trust just by showing up and doing good work wherever I could. And that's so much of how this networking happens. And all to say, going back to the original point of how do the students get started, it's a long, frustrating process. And it is just take every opportunity you can because you don't know what is the opportunity where you're going to see that person that may end up being that opportunity later down the line. Or you may have to meet them several times. Another great example I have is Jeremy Weiss. He's another local entrepreneur, owns CI Records. He's signed bands. He's been a tour manager. He's one I got to work with through launch. Also through the college, I got to show up. Our college sponsors a stage at launch every single year. So I've got to go there, run sound, and I had very brief conversation. I knew Jeremy, but we didn't know each other well.
Right.
And then what had happened was at HMAC, a venue up in Harrisburg, Jeremy was the talent buyer. And basically their production manager was leaving. And again, actually, thanks to Sean. Sean mentioned my name, and Jeremy's like, "Oh yeah, I know Dan. He's great. Yeah, let's see if he'll be a good fit." And then I went and I got the job basically on a interview that was almost a formality, honestly. And then I became a production manager, like kind of overnight almost. Wasn't something I set out to do. It just organically kind of happened that way. I've since left that job, but I'm still in very good terms with Jeremy. We still talk fairly regularly. I just did an event for like kind of launch productions, more of a global thing for him down in DC. I production match Christmas Burns Red, which got my nice little Yeti that Jeremy gifted me. Thank you, Jeremy. So I got to production manage that show with the band August Burns Red as the headliner. All these opportunities. I'm not trying to be self-aggrandizing here, but the point I'm trying to make is that it all just happened from showing up, having some drive and motivation to be in the room and want to do good work, and being consistent about it.
Yeah, no, I can echo that for sure. Students don't realize the long term game that this
Mhm.
is. Networking isn't a short term thing. It's a very much long term. You'll probably show up to many places without anybody knowing you or recognizing you or whatever.
Mhm.
And you have to go multiple times, and this is why we're talking a little bit as an introvert how this can be hard for some
Oh,
people
it's tricky. Yeah.
to push themselves out into these areas because I know I was lucky because I have a platform that's mutually beneficial to meet people with.
Mhm.
Uh, I reach out people, hey, I run this podcast. Would you be interested in blah blah blah? If I didn't have this podcast, it'd be hard pressed for me to reach out to someone to just talk to them.
Yeah.
So you have to go out there, find them where they are, and then just talk to them after the show, or catch them when they're out on the bar or whatever, like you said,
Mhm.
and talk to them that way. One of the things I've been really being doing well at is after I meet someone or I see someone, there's a band.
Mhm.
Okay, there's a band that's cool. Maybe I want them to have them on my podcast. What I'll do is I'll go to one of their shows and I'll tell them, "Hey, I run this podcast. I'd love to see you at your show." Blah 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 blah. And then that's a precursor to them. Okay, he's going to come to our show. We actually know somewhat who he is, so we can expect that exchange afterwards, right? And then you go to the show. You first off, that proves that you're making good on your word
Mhm.
because that's a big red flag for
Oh yeah, follow through. Always follow
follow
through.
through. And
Under promise and over deliver is another good one.
absolutely. Yeah, and that's kind of what I do is I under promise and I over deliver because
Mhm.
I know that's the kind of uh, social engineering
Yeah.
aspect of networking is to make sure to put your give yourself enough advantage to make yourself a worthy net worth
Mhm.
ugh, worthy network.
Yes.
And do it that way. I've gained a lot of great guests through that
Mhm.
just by and simply by just reaching out as
Yeah.
well. And granted, showing up in person is the best way to do so, but even just a shot over messenger like I did to you
Mhm.
or did to so many other of my guests, like, hey, I heard you from this and this person. Would you be interested in going out somewhere or
Yeah.
talking, whatever?
And I mentioned this to you before, but for the sake of your listeners, another thing that you're doing great that your platform provides you is you get people to just talk about themselves, and
Yes.
people love. I mean, you can tell right now I'm long-winded. People love to talk about themselves. Um, so I guess that's another point I should make too. When you're networking for these students that aren't sure how to start that, when you go and buy that beer or whatever example you want to use, um, don't talk their ear off. Let them talk. Be
Mhm.
engaged. Like if you're just like, yeah, they may start to get weirded out because it feels like you're not really engaged in the conversation at all. Like, just repeat back a few things they say, maybe give a few anecdotal things yourself, but keep it to a minimum. I think you said like 80-20 before, which is a good principle. You do 20% of talking, let them do the other 80%. And this podcast for you, for example, is like the perfect medium for that because that is the point. I
That's the
get to
point.
talk about myself because this
Yeah.
is supposed to be,
This
my
is
my episode of your podcast,
yep.
basically. So I get to be in the spotlight. I get to keep talking and, don't have to feel weird about it like I'm punishing someone. But, for outside of this kind of situation, if you're networking at a conference or something,
It works
that's
well.
how you gotta do it. Just let them talk. Even if it's about their dog, let them talk about their dog. Let
Yeah.
them talk about their cute kid. Who cares?
Because they're gonna remember you as the guy that they talked to their dog about,
Mhm.
and then that gives you a personal connection with not even
Yeah.
just like a work connection. That gives you like a
Oh,
personal
yeah.
connection. You can go back up to them and say, "Oh, how's your dog doing?" Or, "Oh, how's your
Mhm.
kid?" Or afterwards, and
Oh,
they'll
yeah.
they'll remember. Oh yeah, that's the guy that I had the beer with at this place, and
And
just
and
talking
that's
about it.
that's a great way too of like if they tell you their dog's name or like the kid's name, next time you see him, be like, "Oh, how's Spot doing?" Like just saying that will be like, "Oh, you actually remember my dogs? Like that's awesome."
Yeah,
It's such a simple little thing, but it means so much to people. And I also want to point out here too, is I'm like mentioning these tricks. These have to be genuine as
they
well.
do.
You can't do
You
this in a
can't force it.
manipulating kind of way. A book that it's kind of a classic. It's a little dated, and I hate the name of it because it sounds so manipulative, but it does have a lot of core concepts that are true. Is the old Dale Carnegie book, How to Win Friends and Influence People.
Mhm.
If you're into self-help kind of things, people already know it. And some people will kind of cringe a little bit when they hear me talk about that because it is one of those things that some, business bros will talk about. But the thing is, when they talk about, it, they're missing the core concept that it's not about being manipulative. It's about genuine connection, and that is the point. And if you're missing that, then you're missing the point.
The concept isn't just to forcefully remember everything. It's a way of life. It's a lifestyle. It
Yes.
should be automatic. It should be generic. It shouldn't
Mhm.
be something you are forced to do. Granted, when I first started it, yeah, I had to write notes just to be sure that I
Oh, yeah,
remember.
it's
That's okay.
you have to train that mindset
Yeah, yeah.
if you're especially not used to thinking that way. But you have to be genuine about it because people can sniff out when you're not being genuine pretty quick these days. Eh, and you're not going to win any friends that way.
No.
So you really got to genuinely care. Like when you're asking about spot, care, and
Mhm.
like you have to mean it because otherwise they'll be like, "Oh, that's weird. Like what kind of game are they trying to play with me?" If they get the sense that you're not being sincere.
Yeah, and it's as simple as like, "Oh, hey, how you doing? Oh, how's your spot doing?"
Hmm.
It's talking about it like that as opposed to uh, just walking up to him and how's spot doing? It's like
Yeah.
that's a
Yeah.
little weird.
Again, it's you have to be in a way a people person. And
Yeah.
you mentioned being an introvert. I too am an introvert. What that means is if you are an introvert, that doesn't mean that like you can't talk to people. You can still learn to be social. Really, just being introvert means that I don't get my energy from that. Like I'm gonna
Mhm.
talk your ear off here. I'm gonna be social, and then I'm gonna go home and I'm gonna sit down and watch TV and
And
like turn my phone off and not talk to anyone. And that's how I recharge. The difference is extroverted people get energy from this.
yes.
That's really the only difference. So that states if you are introverted and you feel like you can't do these things because of it, I think you're selling yourself short, and you can probably learn to do this and become a little more social.
So with all your teaching and everything else that you have, we kind of covered these questions already, but I was wondering, what is something that you know now that you wish you had known when you first started?
Um, it's weird because there's probably so many answers to that question, but it's like when someone asks, "What's your favorite album ever?" I just my brain goes blank of like, there's almost too many options. I can't pick one. Um, Topical because what we're just talking about is honestly that kind of networking. I wish I learned the more social aspect earlier. Because while I was the person that showed up for these opportunities, I was always very awkward and didn't know how to like have those conversations. I feel like I'm still learning that to a degree for sure, but I've gotten better at it. I wish I had pushed myself out of my comfort zone a little bit sooner on that front.
So here's a question: how do you push your students out of their comfort zones?
Um, Start by showing up to the events. That is the first and foremost. The other one is you just have to practice it. There's not really the silver bullet answer where it'd be like, you do this and you'll be great at it. You just have to do it. And I know that feels like a cop out answer, but it's
It's
the most
so
honest
true.
one I can give you.
I was procrastinating on this podcast for so long until someone
Hmm.
figuratively slapped me in the face and just said, "God, you got to do it. You
Hmm.
can't worry. I'm such a visionary."
Yeah.
People who know me from just being interaction, they know I'm a visionary. They know I'm a big plan kind of guy. But you have to be able to put that plan on the paper at some point and say, "Okay, this is actually what we're doing, and we're gonna do it." And that's scary.
Hmm.
And sometimes you just have to do it, and you don't know what's gonna. I didn't know what I'm doing when I started this. The first episode, I'm pretty sure the first line is like, "Are we on?" Which is kind of aptly for a musician
Oh,
podcast, isn't
yeah.
it? Check, check, 1, 2, 3. Are we here?
Yeah.
And but the first way to get better at something is just to start doing it,
Yeah.
and you can work out the kinks as you go along. I didn't have a good camera. Granted, I started off really well with the studio, but
Hmm.
you don't have to start. You can just everyone has a phone, everyone
Yeah.
has a whatever.
Honestly, iPhone cameras are great these
They
days.
are really great. You can start going out and, if you wanna make an impression, take a photo of the band, at them on your story, and that's a great way to get into their DMs and say,
Hmm.
"Oh, this person was there," and then you can make that connection that way.
Yeah.
It's super easy to make connections with bands, with artists, with, sound, with venues just by doing that.
Hmm. I guess the point you bring up too is that I feel like I gave this example earlier and we were just talking off the air, but people procrastinate in ways that feel productive but aren't really moving the needle.
Yes.
Like again, the example I used earlier is I know people who have spent dozens of hours developing their business card and making this beautiful business card, but like what is that realistically doing to execute your ideas? Is that real follow through, or is that you procrastinating going out and actually doing the thing you say you want to do because you're scared? Um, Most of the time, that it's the latter. It's that it's not really moving the needle in any way, and you got to be careful about that.
Right. So
You can overplan.
yeah, you absolutely you can. So you got to make sure that you are actually, yeah, you can spend hours developing your business card, but when are you actually going to go out there and meet people to
Exactly.
maybe give that business card
Hmm.
to? Or and we talked about this how business cards are becoming obsolete.
Yeah. Or even so, a more modern thing, but still just as true is, and I'm guilty of this, like mix engineers. If you want to have a website that clients can go to show your portfolio, that's great, and you should have one. But I know people, and again, I've done this myself. I probably still do this some days where I'll go and I'll spend hours changing up things in my website or like messing with a font on my
It don't
headline.
matter.
It doesn't matter at the end of the day. People don't care. That's not realistically going to get me more work. My website for mixing is just to get people to hear work to see maybe if they're interested in working with me and hearing my portfolio. Now, I'll say personally, if anyone does go check my website, my mixes are out of date. I need to update them. So maybe I do need to go back to that website briefly, but that's like I should go set 2 hours aside and update that. That's not I'm going to go spend a whole day working on that.
Yeah, and especially websites for like bands or whatever, make sure your website looks like it's readable.
Yes.
Yeah, make sure it's decent.
It looks like it's modern, not like it was made on like Windows 95 or something.
Right. Yeah, and there's a great free programs like not free, but Wix or like
Wix is great.
Squarespace.
Yeah, Squarespace, a little price more price than Wix, but still, I mean, it's a lot cheaper than hiring a website designer, and you can still get a pretty solid product, at least for this kind of stuff.
Yeah, I was gonna say, this is a plug for my website. If you check out CoreyRosenProductions.com, you can see the website. I have it up here. It's nice. It's readable. It's very
Mhm.
navigable. It's super easy to make. I did this all by myself. I didn't have to like hire anybody. It's not that hard to do, but it's instrumental, and it doesn't take that long. I didn't take very long to just design this.
Yeah.
It's very much just oh, what do I need? What do I have to have? Let's put it all in there.
And honestly, even if your website feels like it's 80% there, but you're not launching your business or your project because it's not 100% there, who cares?
Yeah.
Just launch it, do the project, start trying to get the work. You can do that last 20% later. That's fine.
Yeah, that's exactly what I did with this podcast. Was
Mhm.
I didn't have I didn't have the website to do. I didn't have anything else. I want to make this into a nonprofit. I still don't have that yet, but who cares? Just do it
Just start
first.
doing it. Yeah.
Start doing it. You can figure that stuff out later. It doesn't
Mhm.
have to be 100% done. Like anyway.
Yeah, and this also goes back to my anecdote about the student that's afraid to make mistakes. A lot of times people procrastinate because they're afraid of that mistake. Look, face it, you're gonna fail. You are going to make mistakes. That is a part of life. Do it, make the mistake now instead of making it later. Just because you'll learn from it. Everything I know is because I messed it up at some point.
Yeah, and especially if you're young, I've gotten so many breaks because I'm young.
Hmm.
And I don't know, this is my first time doing a movie, or this is my first time doing a mobile set. Well, great example. I went to Daryl Davis. I don't know if you've ever heard of Daryl Davis, but
Sounds vaguely familiar.
he was a piano player for Chuck Berry.
Okay.
He's known around for playing with Bruce Springsteen. He's also got a ludicrous side career of converting KKK members into normal people.
Mhm.
So just a side career as a black person, by the way, too.
Okay.
So incredible human being. But I went down to he invited me to his house to record an episode with him. And guess what I forget? I forget the power cord to my Mac.
Such a simple thing, but
Such
yeah.
a simple thing. But
It's enough that it can put you down in water for a second.
yeah, it can put you down in the water, but it's a mistake that I made. And granted, he had his own Mac that he let me use, so
Cool.
so we can still do it. But it's stuff like that. Like you're gonna make those mistakes, and once you make those mistakes, you can count on yourself to never make those again.
Oh yeah. I mean, embarrassment sucks, failing sucks, but like,
What a motivation!
oh yeah, it motivates you. And it'll be a sticking point. Like, there's a reason why, maybe it's just me. I feel like people can relate to this now, but I'll be sitting in bed at night and I'll just remember that random embarrassing
yeah?
thing from 10 years ago.
And no one
And
else
I
remembers
cringe.
those?
Oh, and yeah, no one else is gonna think about that. No one else cares. I sit there like 10 years ago, like, oh my God, this person doesn't like me because this happened 10 years ago. Person I haven't spoken to in 10 years.
Yeah, right, yeah.
Like it really matters to begin with. And the truth is they don't remember. Like I just, if you're ever feeling that way, it's so simple, but just think how many embarrassing situations do you remember other people being in that you were witness to? Probably
Mm.
very little, honestly. So when you're thinking about those embarrassing situations for you, that's probably how other people, I don't even say because they don't remember it.
Yeah.
That's what it is to them, is just maybe someone brought it up. They'd be like, oh yeah, I remember that time that Johnny, slipped and fell, and I don't know. Trying to think of
Right. Well,
good
yeah.
embarrassing situation, but
The
like,
odds are they don't remember it,
yeah,
especially if it wasn't a particularly memorable moment for them either. So
yeah. Well, I mean, there's a reason our brains react to embarrassment. It's memorable for us, not for the people.
exactly, that's exactly
Um,
right.
yeah.
So speaking of embarrassing times, what is one of the most funny or worst things that ever happened to you as a production manager or a musician
Um,
or sound engineer?
Here's a good go-to I've used. It's a while ago, but it's still one that haunts my dreams. I have the cold sweats in the middle of the night. Um, So when I was in high school, if any metal fans out there, my high school band got the opportunity to open for Summer Slaughter, which is just a big metal festival, basically. Contortionist, Periphery, Veil of Meyer. There's a few bands that at the time they weren't huge, but they, again, if you're in the metal, you probably know those names. So we got to open for that. Great show. It was at the Trocadero in Philly, which I think is actually maybe reopening. It was a great spot that closed a few years back. But tiny stage. It's not a huge club. I'll guess from 10 years ago, memory, maybe at like a 500 cap, 500 people could fit in there with like the balcony area. Um, so tinier stage, and it's a festival style thing. So it's probably 8 or 9 bands. And how festivals run is you have cabinets, basically. You backline every band. So the headliners, skiers in the back, and you just put everything in front of that for each band as they go forward. So as the opener, we literally had maybe 5 feet of space to work, and I was at my drum kit between 2 full stack amps, which are pretty tall. Where this comes to the story is the fact that because we were a local band, we hadn't played any really big shows at that point. We're also in high school. We tried to get all our friends out too. All the people want to come see us, but high school kids, most of them couldn't drive. So like my bandmates had to go out and pick people up. All this to say is we got to the point where we were supposed to sound check, and it was only me and my bass player there. There was no one else there. And we set it up, we made it work, but we didn't get a real full sound check. So okay, fine. All right. Of course the, venue staff's already frustrated with us. The tour, it wasn't a good look for us, unfortunately. But we were young, we learned from it. The most embarrassing part of it was that aside from just not being most professional we could have been for a pretty big opportunity of time for us, because we didn't get that sound check, I never got really to dial in a monitor mix. So what I need to hear, for those of you who don't know, monitors are the speakers on stage that point at the performers so that they can hear what they need to hear from their bandmates to be able to play. And also because we're so backlined with all the other gear, the guitar amps are well in front of me. So I don't even have the actual amps next to me.
Wow.
Basically, what happened is there was nothing in my monitors at the end of the day. And the monitor engineer typically sits side stage. So they'll be off stage to the side. And I'm between 2 half stacks. So I have no line of sight to this guy. So I can't even wave at him and be like, turn this up. And the first song we play starts with just guitar. At this point, again, we only played small little clubs at this point where I didn't really ever need monitors because it was that tiny of a stage and I was right next to the guitar amps anyway. So I didn't really even think about it until my guitarist starts playing and I can't hear him play. I'm like, are we starting yet? I look over and his hands are moving. I'm like, oh, that ain't good. I had no idea where he was, and I had to come in at a certain point. I was kind of able, just because of how his hand was moving, I could see on the back of the neck of like, I'm going to take a guess here based on where he's at.
Remember.
I'm like, okay, I come in on the lower chord. So when he goes down, okay. And I came in and I was not on time, but my bandmates kind of adjusted. And then it became a show where I just had to play. I just played
Blind,
basically.
yeah.
And I was like, you guys have to follow me. There's no other option here because you can hear me at least. So that was just a day that should have been so cool and so fun. At the end of it, we were all just like heads down and ashamed because we did not handle the situation as professionals. And again, we were high school kids. We were not professionals at the end of the day. We learned from it. But at the same time, we were high school kids with an ego that were like, yeah, like inviting all our friends and everyone like, yeah, we're playing Summer Slaughter. Like, we're hot shots. And, we kind of looked like, fools at the end of the day there a little bit. And it's just one of those things. I still have weird nightmares that I'm playing a show and that kind of stuff happens. Even though now I use in-ear monitors, which if you're a drummer, especially if you want to save your ears, please use in-ears.
Yeah,
shows are too loud. As a production manager, shows are too loud. I'll be upfront about it.
And you know why they're too loud? Is because nobody uses ear protection when they're.
There's that. Oh, the worst thing is when I was working at HMAC, we'd get some of the older bands in, the more like legacy acts that have their front of house engineers that have been touring since the 70s. Every single one of them, because what goes first is the high end. It's the higher frequencies that you hear is what generally you lose first. Every single one of those bands had the brightest, most like ear-piercingly bright sounding mixes because all those guys they couldn't hear any high frequencies. So they just cranked it on the board so they could hear it, which meant for anyone that had closer to normal hearing, it was just
deafening.
painful. But that was seeing that in person was a very cautionary tale of like, I gotta protect my hearing. I don't want to be that.
No, I don't want to be that when you grow older. Well, hey, where can people find you at?
So I mean, as far as websites, my Instagram handle is just willdrumforcash9. Yeah, it's an old one I've had forever. I should probably change it, but that's my Instagram handle right now. My website is danmeyerproductions.com. I do need to update portfolio. Besides that, I mean, I work out of several studios. York College, I have clients in there. I work out of Atrium Audio a little bit over in Lidditz. So my hands on a lot of stuff. I mean, really, the thing I want to drive home, my plug here is I want to work with your band. I want to do more mixing projects. I've done a lot of production managing and other things and worn a lot of hats, and I'm kind of at the point where I want to steer more into that. So if you like what I have to say and think we could hang out and have fun in a recording session or something, hit me up.
I definitely think we're gonna have fun with recording sessions as we start off this collaborative songwriting thing I want to do, because we need I don't this is studio is only good for workshopping. We need places to record. So we will definitely be looking to reach out to you. And if you guys out there have any recording studios, because the whole idea of this new project that we're starting is collaborative songwriting. And by the end of this year, I want to be able to have like an EP or an album to share with everybody, because I think that'd be really cool of having an album full of all local artists. And it'd be really cool if they were produced and or mixed in different studios too, because everyone has their little input to put on the mix or whatever.
Oh yeah.
So if
and I'll plug York College has a studio that's open to the public. Triforce Pro Audio out in Lancaster, Atrium Audio. So many great studios in the area, honestly. Yeah.
And we're gonna take advantage of them all.
Yes.
So
I work at several of them, so please do.
Yeah. So if you are a musician that's interested in collaborative songwriting, or if you have just enjoyed this episode, you can go over to our website, CoreyRosenProductions.com. That's CORYROSEN Productions.com. You can find out more about me, my own projects, and this podcast full of 130 some guests before me and a lot of guests after. This week on Friday, we have Dustin LeBlanc. He is a managing director over at West Shore Theater. He's also done artistic directing for many theaters and production companies over in Harrisburg, I think it is. But I'm really excited to talk to him. It's the first theater guy that I've had on in a while, so I'm excited to get back into the theater show world. And this Saturday, our interview with Night Owl Country Band, a band out of Indiana that run the Who's Who Award. And it's this kind of a funny wordplay there, because it's who as in like an owl and then a who's who, right? And
love puns.
Love puns. And they're off branch of the ISSA, which is the International Singer-Songwriter Association Awards. So it was a really great interview with them. And then next Monday, we have JC Fetlock, who has been a local artist in here for a while now. So I'm really excited to talk to them. And we have a lot of other guests that you'll just have to find out next time.
Oh, I'm sorry if I can do one more plug.
Oh, sure.
Volume to Nothing is opening up for the Black Moods on March 30th at Love Drafts in Mechanicsburg. So it should be a cool show if you can make it out to that one too.
That's a rough day. You know why?
Why is that?
That's also the CPMA Awards.
Oh, it is. You're right.
Yeah. That's a rough night.
If you want to go, I don't know. If you don't feel like singing through awards. If you more want to mosh and crowd surf and do that stuff, come to our show.
Mosh and crowd surf. That sounds like a good time. Well, I hope you guys have had if you like the show, please be sure to like, follow, comment, share the page. It really does help us out. And we really want to expand and do greater things for the musicians in Central PA. With all that said, I hope you guys have a wonderful rest of your day, and we will see you guys later. Bye.